Working is presented by Maya Strategy Group, a leading market research and strategy consulting firm, helping clients in the pet care and animal health industries navigate strategic challenges for almost 2 decades. Peter Kenseth is not a licensed insurance agent. His opinions are based on his 15-plus years of experience consulting in the P&C insurance industry and are his own. Mr. Kenseth's comments do not reflect the views of Independence Pet Group.
Everyone, and welcome to Pet Working. I'm Peter Kenseth, Vice President and Partner at Maya Strategy Group, and I am here today with another great episode focused on one of my favorite topics, and that is pet insurance. But we're going to take a little bit of a different spin on it today. We're going to look at pet insurance from the veterinary side of things, and I am super excited to have with me on the show Jennifer Sperry. Jennifer is a licensed veterinarian and the medical director of Independence Pet Group. And I'm going to let Jennifer get into the background of Independence Pet Group and who they are and what they do. But the other reason I'm really excited to have her on is prior to becoming the medical director at Independence Pet Group, Jennifer was a practicing veterinarian and saw firsthand the effects of veterinary burnout as a result of being unable to treat animals that due to financial reasons, whether that's economic euthanasia or just having to watch a pet suffer unnecessarily because their owner didn't have the funds to pay for the treatment. This is a big issue in veterinary medicine, and one I think we have a ready-made solution for with pet insurance. And Jennifer is right alongside me in sharing that perspective. So without further ado, I will turn it over to her. Jennifer, thank you so much for being on the show, and welcome to Pet Working.
Thanks, Peter. I'm really excited for the chance to talk to you and to talk about my passion, which is making veterinary care accessible for pet families. And this is a great topic, I think, for you to focus on. So I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's such a critical issue today. I mean, we just did an episode with Hills and their chief veterinary officer, Dr. Karen Shenoy, a couple weeks ago, and it was on the state of shelter pet adoptions, and it was showing that particularly for dogs, adoptions are down, and one of the biggest concerns and reasons that are preventing people from adopting pets and getting pets is concerned about the cost of ownership, first and foremost, veterinary care. And, I think pet insurance, while not free and not necessarily cheap in all cases, definitely can give you a way to help budget and plan for and understand what your potential outlay will be from a medical perspective, and put you in a position to provide the best possible veterinary care and medical treatment for your pet. No, I think it's great. And before we get too much further, on a fun side note, I do want to point out that you're joining us from vacation, and so I think this is the first time we've had somebody remotely join us on the show, and so I appreciate you taking time from your family vacation here at the end of the summer and talking to us about it. But maybe you could start can you tell us a little bit about Independence Pet Group and the company's structure, organization, mission, and then maybe get into your personal story of how you came to become the medical director at Independence Pet Group.
Yeah. Well, you know what? If you don't mind, I think I'll start with my origin story personally, if it's not too self-indulgent, because then it describes Independence Pet Group a little bit, and how I came to work for them as well. So
by all means, go ahead.
Oh, great. So I worked in small animal medicine. I worked in general practice, taking care of dogs and cats. And I also worked in emergency practice, taking care of dogs and cats and pocket pets and reptiles and birds as well. And I did that for about 12 years. And when I was early in my career, I was really engaged with growing, with learning, becoming as good of a vet as I could be. But then once I got kind of up to cruising altitude, I started to look around, and I think like many people do, I started to notice some of the things that were a little bit less good about my profession and about my career. And one of the things was that I constantly encountered pet owners that wanted to do everything they could for their pets, but had a financial barrier. And it started to feel like I was taking them to the buffet and showing them everything that was available in veterinary medicine to help their pets, and then telling them they couldn't eat, because the cost is not just unachievable for really financially restricted people, but as veterinary medicine matures and advances, it's becoming unreachable for regular families like my own. So I wouldn't go it alone anymore with my own pet's medical care and the expenses, just because I know what's out there for them and I know how expensive those costs can be. So for me as a vet, coming up against that barrier over and over again and seeing the frustration in the clients, seeing the heartbreak in the clients, of having to walk away from an available treatment was really wore me down. It was friction in my relationship with my clients. And so I started looking around for what the solutions were. And of course, there are charities, and those address a certain very limited segment of the pet owning population. And there are, personal financing options that address a certain, maybe more affluent segment of the population. But there's this whole big middle ground that I'm a part of that I can really relate to, where insurance seemed to be the most powerful option. So for me, living with that frustration was getting harder and harder, and I wanted to be part of a solution that provided a more meaty, more substantial access financially to the care. So I started looking around for roles within the pet insurance industry to see where a veterinarian can contribute perspective. So Independence Pet Group, or IPG, is now a group of multiple brands of insurance, operating under their own multiple unique products. But I'm still here providing the veterinary insights. And I'm not a licensed insurance person, so I'm not here to tell people what brand is right for them or what insurance product is right for them. But what I am here to do is to tell the stories of what access to care restrictions look like on the ground as a veterinarian, and even as a pet owner, and also to share my perspectives on how insurance changes the dynamic on the ground in the veterinary hospital for those pet owners.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's so much to, first, thank you for sharing your story. Because, I think it paints a very poignant picture of, being in that role as a veterinarian, wanting to be a trusted advisor and a resource, for the families and pets that you're serving, knowing that you have those available treatments, and your analogy of taking them to the buffet and telling them that they can't eat really rings true. If and perhaps even more poignantly, if you're dealing with a critical medical condition and there's a solution, there's a treatment there that's available, and you can't afford it. That has to, I can't imagine being in that situation. And, it gets back to what I say about pet insurance all the time is we have statistics that say that over 90% of families in America refer to their pets as a member of their family and as their children. And you would never let your kids be uninsured. I cannot, I can't, as, both a pet parent and a parent of two wonderful young kids, I could not ever imagine knowing that there was something wrong with any of them and not doing everything in my power to address it. And, I think for a lot of people, if they don't have pet insurance, that's the position that they're putting themselves in. And it's just a situation that you don't want to see anyone in. I want to go down that road of the experiences you've had, what you've seen, I've been a pet owner for almost 8 years now, and I know when Teeny's over there enjoying a woof popsicle, but when we first got her, it was $65 to go to our vet, and it is now close to $100 just for the visit. And, there are not cost controls on the cost of veterinary care right now. It's the Wild West. You can, as a vet, you can charge whatever you want for a visit, and nothing is going to stop you. And that may be something to get into a little bit more later, but I'd love to hear your perspective as a veterinarian as to what, other factors that are driving the cost of care. We talk about that being a principal barrier to people getting pets and adopting, but for people who are pet owners that also, and don't have pet insurance, it puts you in a situation where you may not seek medical treatment for your pet because you're afraid of the cost of the vet bill. It's definitely not a tenable situation.
Right.
I guess, from here, Jennifer, you mentioned that you're not a licensed veterinarian, and as such, you're a licensed veterinarian. You are not a licensed. Of course, you're a licensed veterinarian. That would make sense. You're not a licensed insurance agent, so you can't speak to the pros and cons of different plans, rates. That's one of the things that we have seen that has really prevented veterinarians from becoming more involved in the recommendation of insurance to their clients. You're a licensed veterinarian, you're not a licensed insurance agent. So, technically it's illegal for veterinarians to provide recommendations on specific plans and rates. From an independence pet perspective, how do you approach, encouraging veterinarians to tell their clients that they need pet insurance? And is that something that you do?
Yeah, it's definitely something I do. So I think there has been, I'm going to go back to your escalating cost of care comments. And then I'll come to this, because I think, one of the things I like to do, I think, is give the veterinary community or the veterinary science some credit when we examine the cost of care, because even in the course of my career, like you said, when you first got your dog, the visit was significantly lower cost. And when I first started practicing, my very first practice I worked in, an office visit was $35. So $35 was what got you a half hour at the time with the veterinarian. And I don't consider, my career's been fairly short. I've been practicing for about 17 years. So that's not a lot of time. But I think what we need to realize is that in 1 or 2 generations, veterinary medicine has completely been overhauled, right? Because we've wanted the same level of care that we offer our children and our relatives to our furry relatives, right? So when I was a kid, we did not have licensed veterinary nurses. When I was a kid, we didn't have after-hours care or 24-hour hospitalization. In fact, in my first clinical role, we very rarely hospitalized patients, and we very rarely referred them. And it was just the culture around pets at the time. But now we send them to specialists. They get MRIs and CT scans, and they get advanced surgical techniques. They're getting advanced cancer care now. So we have these things to offer, as opposed to, again, 1 or 2 generations ago, we had, some maybe antibiotics that we were offering, maybe some pain care, some more basic surgical techniques, but nothing close to what we're able to offer, especially in an urban area where we have these referral centers. So that's changed a lot, but our minds are still back in that visit that we went to the vet with our parents and our family dog or cat, and it was a $50 visit, right? So it's hard to shift that mindset quite a bit, and it's hard for veterinarians to educate pet owners out of that mindset as well, because we're trying to compete, as vets, we're trying to compete with the neighboring clinics. We don't really want to highlight how expensive our services are, because that gets to be kind of a touchy conversation, especially when a pet's coming in as a well pet, and they're coming in for a well pet visit. We don't want to say, maybe you've chosen us because we're a more cost-effective clinic in the area, but also we want you to know how expensive illness care is comparatively to this wellness care, right? It's a very sensitive topic, and it's one that I think veterinarians are not super comfortable with. We don't like to highlight. We almost feel uncomfortable with charging for our time and charging for our services. So it's not our biggest comfort zone to talk about the more expensive bills, especially when the pet insurance conversation is ideal and the pet is young and healthy. So that gets to be a bit of a barrier for having that conversation.
Yeah, it would. And, I think you raise a good point. We've advanced the science because we want the same care options for our fur babies as we do for our real babies. But I do think vets are put in an unfair position because your pediatrician charges what they charge. They send a bill that gets sent to your insurance company. You pay the copay or the deductible or the balance, and there's an established system in place. And there's established, medical community dedicated to advancing the science, dedicated to research, dedicated to ensuring best practices, and there is an insurance industry that serves as a check on cost of care because they put reimbursement minimums or maximums in place. They're able to say, well, that's great that you charge this for an office visit. We're only paying you this.
Yes.
And it takes that out of the equation, whereas for a veterinarian, you are billing the patient directly. And it's not, I think we're at this inflection point where we're seeing these incredible advances in veterinary science and in veterinary medicine, and the insurance infrastructure has not caught up to keep pace with it. So I've talked to people that say, look, the U.S. is an insurance averse society. If you look, even though we're all legally mandated to have health insurance under Obamacare, there are people that don't do that. If you look at, we're all theoretically required to have car insurance, and yet we still have uninsured motorist premiums on our policies because there's people that decide to drive their car without car insurance. I would be curious though, I think we're at a point where it's just not sustainable to have 4% adoption in terms of pet insurance. You're going to increasingly see these situations where people are not able to afford the care that they need, and then they have to forgo treatment. And I mean, I know you talked about, bringing the perspective of how having pet insurance changes those barriers to care in the clinic, in the veterinary hospital, in an emergency setting. I can speak firsthand personally. I mean, I know, P&E, fortunately or unfortunately, my first project in the pet care and animal health industries was in pet insurance way back in 2009. And so when I adopted her, I said, there's no way I'm ever going to have a dog without having pet insurance. And within the first few weeks we had her, she'd been misdiagnosed as being heartworm negative. She had a horrible reaction to the heartworm medication that we gave her. She was vomited like 8 times, had to take her to the emergency vet. That was like a $2,500 visit. Fortunately that ended up being covered. She just, even a few weeks ago, she had, a few weeks, or at the end of the summer now, I guess back in April, she had this thing where she was just losing control of her hind legs and dragging. And, I posted this in the article we had that accompanied the episode we did with OD Pet Insurance. And like you said, we live in a time in a society now where referrals are commonplace. And my vet looked at the video because she was doing it often enough, and she was like, that's not normal. I don't know what that is, but she sent it to her prof at the University of Purdue, who's a certified veterinary neurologist. She recommended that we get an MRI, and we did, and we weren't able to pinpoint the root cause. There was a disc herniation, but they said the neurologist who saw her here in Burlington said that didn't fully explain it, but we at least were able to see the disc herniation. They put her on gabapentin, and it's largely resolved. But the MRI was $4,000, and with obviously, I love P&E to death, and I probably would have paid for it anyway. But it made it a much easier decision when I only had to shell out $400 for it as a 10% coinsurance payment than $4,000. And a big part of the reason I did it was, some of the other possible causes that, they were postulating were that it could be a blood clot that was getting, and I was like, well, I don't want her to die of a blood clot, or that's, so I think, that's just one story. And I'm sure you have far more compelling ones from your time, but, I can't personally underscore enough the value of pet insurance and the access to care that it's been able to provide, and the quality of life that it's been able to provide for P&E.
Yeah. And I think you're describing a journey that's just really, really common among pet owners. And, I saw it repeated over and over. So when I was practicing, I would have people come in, and they were busy families with lots of priorities, and something would come up that was completely unexpected, right? And they would be in my office, and they would be worried, they would be stressed, and they would be looking at their pet that was, in pain or feeling really crummy. And we would be just at the beginning of figuring out what's going on. But of course, we have to be very forthcoming about costs. Like you mentioned, your pediatrician never has to discuss costs with you. That's not part of their role, right? They're talking about options and what's best for your family. And that's what veterinarians want to do. And I think that's why we often shy away from the insurance conversation. But unfortunately, the way our system is set up, we are the people that need to bring it up. We need to talk about the cost of what we're offering so that they can provide informed consent. And so we are unfortunately in the best position also to talk about insurance and other financing options. But when I had a family come in, there was a very structured response to an unseen or unforeseen illness. And what they would do is they come in and we talk about what's going on. Like I said, they're worried, they're stressed, they're focused on their pet. And then I would have to talk about the estimate for the diagnostic tests that I wanted to do, the care that I wanted to provide. And people would have sticker shock because they're most experienced with a wellness visit to the vet. And wellness costs are artificially suppressed because veterinarians compete with their other local clinics on wellness costs. People shop around for, vaccine costs, spay-neuter costs, things like that. So those are actually, even though they're a lot of money, they are an artificially suppressed price. So when somebody is coming in with an illness, and I'm talking about what the cost is, their benchmark sits with that wellness visit. And I start talking about costs, for things like MRIs or root canals or these advanced procedures, or just even diagnostics to figure out what's going on. And it's often, 4 or 5 times what their annual wellness visit is, even without surgery, even without hospitalization. We're just talking about diagnostics, right? So people have this sticker shock, and they would get angry. Not angry because they truly thought, I was ripping them off or anything like that. It was just the emotional place that they're in. They're not expecting that cost. And so we would have to navigate that emotional response. And once they wrap their head around the sticker shock, then they had to start scrambling. They'd be calling, friends and family for a loan, or they'd be calling their spouse, trying to decide if they were going to spend that money. They would be setting up GoFundMe accounts. All of these things would be happening in my front lobby while we're waiting to decide how we're going to address this pet's illness. And once a family decided how much they could scramble together for money, then they had to compare that against my original treatment plan. We had to decide where compromises needed to be made. And then we would decide on a treatment plan that fit their needs and fit their budget. And vets are they're pretty crafty. We can stretch it as, a budget really far, to go a long way to help a pet. And we always are going to have that flexibility, and we're always going to be versatile like that. But not everybody feels good about making compromises. The pet owners don't, families don't, veterinarians don't, but we can make it work. But the problem is people love their pets so much. They prioritize their pets so much that they would stretch that budget. They would take the maximum that they could manage out of their other areas of their life to spend on that pet. And then I wouldn't see them for a long time. So maybe I would solve the problem. Maybe I would get the pet through the crisis, but then they're in financial recovery mode. So the next time that recheck comes around, or the next time that wellness visit comes around, I might not see them because they're still recovering, right? So it was this whole dance that I think can be avoided, because that, 3-4% of my patients that came in that were insured was a completely different experience, because we were making those decisions based on what was best for the family. We were making those decisions based on what was best for the pet. We were partners in care. So we were sitting down and we were saying, what route are we going to take that's going to work out best for everybody? We weren't having that conversation about what route are we going to take that's going to be able to fit into a budget. So it's a really, really different conversation, and it really had us on the same team, and it felt so much better for me as a practitioner, that I was really sold on the concept of insurance as a whole, not necessarily one product or another, but just the way it changed the medical journey for everybody.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's one of those things that, I've often wondered, because I do our finance and insurance practice here at Maya, in addition to the pet care and animal health practice. And one of the really cool things I've seen in the auto insurance industry actually comes from a company that's just down the road from my house here in Williston, Vermont. They're now called Poly. It used to be called Dealer Policy, but they came up with a very innovative solution for the auto insurance industry, where they sold this app into car dealerships, and then insurance companies could pay them to be on the app. And when you were going through your new car, lease, purchase, what have you at the dealership, obviously that's a point in time where you need to have car insurance to drive that car off the lot. The dealer will check it. Particularly if you're financing or leasing it, they're definitely going to make sure that you have it insured. And so it's a point in time where people are actually considering new auto insurance, and they had an app where they could go through and they would get quotes from different carriers, and they would be able to present you and say, okay, well, if you were to switch from your current carrier to this would save you here. And they would actually use it as a tool to potentially, say, oh, this could offset a higher monthly payment. Those car salesmen are not licensed insurance agents, in the same way that veterinarians are not licensed pet insurance agents. But I wonder if there's not an opportunity to have an app like that in the industry, that you could at least pull up prospective quotes, and stay on the right side of the legal guidelines. Don't necessarily advocate for one brand or another, or one plan or coverage or anything like that, but at least be able to pull, okay, for your puppy, you're going to be looking at about $29 a month with a $200 deductible, and you can see across carriers, this is an average of what you would spend. And then compare that to, like you said, people get sticker shock. I mean, I know if we go in and, the visit is going to be $95 to $100. And then if we have any blood work done, that's probably another $250 to $300. And if we have any imaging done, even just x-rays, that's another $300. So, right there, you're at like $700 for one visit, right? Between the cost of the visit, blood work, and imaging, at least 700, and probably, in a lot of cases, you get, depending on if you do more than one diagnostic test or, need to do multiple views on your imaging, you're probably looking at close to $1,000 for that visit. And, if you do that out by, okay, your monthly insurance payment would be X, and you have X deductible and X coinsurance, you have a pretty good idea of, okay, it's going to take one vet visit where something goes wrong for me to net out at even, right? And, and 40%, and I think it would totally change the paradigm, because at that point, you are incentivizing people to go to the vet. And like, what is it right now? Like, at least only 40% of pets even visit their veterinarian once a year.
That's right.
So we have 60% of pets that aren't being seen. And we've explored the problems with that, where, you're potentially not catching issues that would be easy to address if you caught them sooner, in the same way we go for our annual physical and have cancer screenings to treat when you catch it early. We're putting 60% of pets in a situation where they're going to be in a far worse position because they're not going to the vet regularly. It's one of those things that it makes so much sense, and I can't for the life of me figure out why we're still hovering at 4%. Because it seems to me to be such easy financial calculus. And we have the statistics to say that, and we're seeing the advances in the industry to support people want to treat their pets as family. And it really also resonated with me when you were there talking about, people putting GoFundMes together in the waiting room. We had Daryl Hatton of Connection Point on earlier this year, and they do Pet Funder, which is a pet specific crowdfunding GoFundMe like app. They're based out of Vancouver, and he and I have talked about it. It's one of those things, like, for people without pet insurance, this is what they resort to. They resort to crowdfunding. I know I mentioned to you briefly when we first met, but we're trying to put together a fundraiser to raise awareness for this idea of angel funds and emergency plans, that could be tied to a vet clinic to allow veterinary clinics to withdraw from these charitable funds to treat cases that they know that they can treat when people don't have pet insurance. But I think on the other side of it, there needs to be marketing that, like, okay, you got saved this time, but let's start moving the conversation more towards getting more people to buy pet insurance. And
I just think, there was, and I am ashamed to have been part of this mindset, but when you're a veterinarian and you're faced with family after family that has to say no to care, there was this mantra in my early practicing days that, people within the clinics would say, well, if you can't afford to care for your pet, you should really reconsider having one. But I think we now know how deep and rich the bond is with pets, and how positive the impact of pets can be on our lives. And that's no matter where we are in life and what our, socioeconomic status is. So I would hate to continue that mindset where there is a segment of the population that cannot benefit from pets in their lives because of the amount of money they have available to contribute to care. Because honestly, if we're looking at the true cost of care now, I'm out of that bracket, right? I'm out of that bracket. I can't, if my pet needs $30,000 of care, and this is a really, really common goalpost to hit now with advanced care, I would have to say no without insurance. Like, that's out of the question for my family. I'm coming to you from my Nissan. This is not, we're not a family that just has that laying around. And so I learned that really quickly.
very few families do. I mean, I
Yeah.
think the stats I've seen, 70% of families can't afford an unanticipated $400 expense, let alone 30,000. So, and and like you said, it's not uncommon, if you're dealing with something like cancer or, spinal surgery or, IVDD or something like that, where, yeah, you could easily rack up. I mean, even just he didn't need surgery; it was just an MRI, and that was $4,000 in and of itself.
Yeah.
Um,
And I was foolish enough, to think when I was practicing, I thought, well, I'm providing my own care. I'm doing all the service. I'm getting the materials at cost. I should be fine, right? But my specifically one dog, he liked to get all of the problems that I could not deal with on my own. So he needed an MRI. He needed a root canal. So he needed specialty surgery. So these were things that I did end up paying out of pocket. And that was 10 or more years ago when costs were a little bit lower. I didn't have two children yet. I didn't have as big of a mortgage yet. But still, that was me in the middle of the night having a conversation with my husband about, where what can we achieve here, right? What's realistic in our lives? So, I think that even when veterinarians who can do their own work need to start considering insuring their pets, I think that is the point where we have to acknowledge that many of the families that we work with do not have a good benchmark for what the cost of care is. We need to talk about it with them often, not just when they come in with a new puppy, but throughout their lives. And we need to be giving them a place to go, like you said, places like Policy Advisor or comparison sites. Maybe we don't want to put our names behind a particular product, but we do want to give them actionable advice where they can go and explore these things and maybe even get a variety of stories that help illustrate how these products can help them.
Yeah. And I think, also working to kind of dispel the myths that, about the ineffectiveness. Because a lot of times when I'm talking about pet insurance with people, I hear, oh, well, that didn't work. And, I've heard that, they don't cover anything, or, I got this through my company and I made one claim and they canceled my coverage. And just like any other form of insurance, you need to be educated about what you're buying, what it's going to cover, what your responsibilities are, what your deductible is, what your co-insurance is, what are the exclusions. I mean, it's no different than it. And I say this fully, I mean, there are literally no exceptions. It's no different from auto or home insurance because it's underwritten as P&C insurance. Pets are considered property, but it's no different than somebody thinking, that their house is going to be protected from a flood, when most homeowners policies exclude flood damage, from the coverage. You need to read that your homeowners doesn't cover you. It doesn't provide flood insurance. And if you want that's a separate thing that you need to get. Similarly, and I think probably the biggest issue I see with pet insurance is the idea of pre-existing conditions. And, I think that really, it really presents a sour taste for a lot of people, because if you have a pet that has had any kind of experience at the vet, you're not going to be covered for those conditions. And so it makes it really hard to get people who have middle-aged pets, onboarded, even if they buy into the concept of pet insurance, then they realize, well, what am I paying for? I have a 7-year-old dog here and we've been to the vet for this, and this. So, and it's going to cost me a lot. I think that's one of the problems that needs to get solved within the industry. Is there needs to be a way to onboard older pets, either that, or we, at least until we can get adoption rates up. And then I think, more and more, and I know a lot of companies are doing this, there needs to be partnerships with shelters, with, sites, like Rescue Spot. We've had Nicole Patrick on. They're partnering with Odie, and there's an option when you fill out the application and finalize the adoption on Rescue Spot to be able to add a pet insurance policy through Odie to your adoption. We're seeing other insurance companies partner directly with local shelters, but that's a great time to get pet insurance, because a lot of times rescues don't have a medical history or a medical record. Similarly with puppies and breeders. If I were a breeder, I would find an insurance company that I wanted to work with, and I would absolutely refer my clients. They're not licensed insurance agents either, but they could at least provide literature. And I think that's going to help start to change the tide here, because that is the big problem, is that for a lot of people they don't realize all these pre-existing conditions aren't covered. And I think Odie, we did an episode with them in light of the nationwide cancellations, where Nationwide terminated coverage for 100,000 policies. They're actually they have an option now where they will backdate coverage for as long as you have had coverage with another carrier. So you can transfer your coverage to them, or if your coverage is canceled, you can go and apply for Odie, and as long as you have had continuous coverage, similar to a home or auto insurance product, you will be able to be covered for those conditions that you had treatment under while you had a different insurance coverage. And so I think seeing innovations like that within the industry give me a lot of confidence that adoption is going to become much more widespread, and hopefully we as an industry can address some of these barriers that keep people from getting pet insurance, because as you said, it completely changes the game, not only for pet parents, but for veterinarians. It opens up your full toolkit, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. With the pre-existing conditions, it is sticky, because a lot of times that first illness is a pet family's first introduction to the cost of care. So that's the first moment that they think, oh, I need a sophisticated solution for this. And that's when they maybe remember that conversation with their vet that happened when, the puppy or kitten first came in. But what I would say as a vet is, there are for that one way that your pet got sick that made you realize that they need insurance, there are hundreds of other ways that they can get sick in the future. So I hate it when people think that the value of insurance is lost once your pet becomes ill the first time, because I've seen pets come in for multiple different reasons that cost their owners a lot of money.
I think, and that's a great point that you raised. I think when people are doing, it's just challenging, because you're trying, if putting my salesperson's hat on here, I think the easiest way to educate people about it is to show them costs of, a typical vet visit, like we walked through earlier with the diagnostics, the imaging, any therapeutics that you're going to prescribe, and then show them a monthly cost of pet insurance. Yeah. And it just makes it a much harder equation for people to understand if, then you start adding in, and pre-existing condition X won't be covered. And, let's think about, how much you might have to spend or save, for that. I will not pretend to be an expert in how they were able to, so I'm assuming that there was significant government subsidies that played into Obamacare's mandate of, no more exclusions for pre-existing conditions. But, obviously that's not, as much as we believe, want, and in some cases need for our pets to be our family members, we do need to remember, there is still a difference between human medicine and veterinary medicine. And, there is still a difference in the, I think one of the saddest things about being a pet owner is, they're the babies that we are almost invariably destined to outlive. And, so it creates its own set of challenges, but, I think, if we can move it in the right direction, and that's, pet owners being made aware of, being educated, becoming more conscious of the advantages to having pet insurance, and the burden that they're alleviating from veterinarians. That's one thing, that we didn't really talk about, but, you found a very healthy and productive outlet for the burnout that you experienced. But, so many vets, um, are not able to find a healthy way to deal with it, or it dramatically affects their mental health to the point, where we see veterinarians with the highest suicide rate of any profession other than police and firefighters. And I think it's incumbent on, the pet owning population to recognize that your vet is there as a resource and a care provider for your family, but you also have to be able to to work with them to put them in the best position to succeed. And I think, for the most part, I'm sure there are some exceptions, but I think it's almost a universal truth. People become veterinarians because they love animals, they want to care. They're you're a very compassionate population. And I can fully understand, and it breaks my heart when to think about putting veterinarians in a position where you can make a difference, you can help, and the money isn't there to do it. It's just one of those things that it drives me nuts, and I'm really hopeful that we can, as an industry, can work to kind of end this crisis of economic euthanasia, or lack of care due to economic means, because I don't think it benefits anyone.
Yeah. I think as vets, I think, part of burnout is losing the capacity for the amount of empathy that you need in the job. And that's where you see sentiments like, if you can't afford a pet, you shouldn't have one, because that's us veterinarians protecting ourselves and our own emotions by saying, that's not my problem. That's somebody else's problem to deal with. I have the solution, but, I can't offer it. And I think when you face that over and over again, you need to find ways to protect yourself. But unfortunately, that sometimes comes at the cost of empathy that we are wired to be able to give. Like you said, we come into this profession, really wanting to help animals. And sometimes it's frustrating to not be able to. But the reality is that it's not really, I would hate to see it being something, pets being a luxury, because they just don't function that way in our lives. Like, that's not how we as a society react to pets. We just need good solutions to be able to kind of meet somewhere between the veterinary profession and the pet owning families, just because we're mostly one and the same, right? We are the same population a lot of the time.
Yeah, no, it's just sad when you think about, that inherent characteristic or trait being, extinguished, right? Because as you said, it's what it's a huge part of how you're wired and what lets you do what you do so effectively. It breaks my heart when I see it. And particularly when there is a solution out there, and you can get insurance, or hopefully I do have this dream, and I'm hopeful it will come to fruition this fall, of start a model for these angel funds, but just really doing what we can to raise awareness around this issue, because it's an issue, like you said, we're all part of the same family. It's an issue that affects veterinarians. It's an issue that affects pet parents. It's an issue that affects pets. Ultimately, it benefits the industry as well, because more people with pet insurance, more people going to the vet, more people buying food for their pets. It's a full circle, and it takes a village. So I'm hopeful we can work to bring this forward. And I think the fact that you're out there on the front lines talking to vets, serving as a liaison for the industry, getting more vets to become more vocal, bring awareness of pet insurance to their clients. It's needed. It's absolutely needed, because like you said, for so many people, it's not until something goes wrong that they think about needing it. And not that it's too late, but for the future, but it's too late in that instance. And so the more we can get people on board with the idea of pet insurance early on, either right after adoption or right after they get a puppy home from a breeder, would be fantastic.
Yes, I couldn't agree with you more. And I had a conversation with a vet tech at one of the conferences, and she said, it's so funny because in pet insurance, we always, the typical, sales approach is to tell people you need pet insurance so that you can say yes to what your vet is proposing in terms of care. And what this technician said to me was, I need pet insurance because I already know I'm going to say yes. I already know I'm going to say yes. So I need to protect myself that way. And I thought that's a really insightful thought. And I think that's where a lot of pet owners are. There was a statistic that came out about the large percentage of pet families that would take on debt to care for their pet. And I think there's a lot of people out there that absolutely would. It's whether or not their bank will offer that debt, right? So I think, I think where we are with our relationship with animals is just at a point where we need to plan for them a little bit differently.
Yeah, no, 100%. I wholeheartedly echo that sentiment, and that's what I said right after I did my first project on pet insurance. I know myself. I know I would never want to be in that position where I was making a financial decision about my pet's life.
Yes,
you can't make the right choice, in that situation. You're either going to be saddling yourself with, thousands of dollars in debt, or you're going to be making a decision to say goodbye to your pet. And either one of those decisions, I would never want to have to make. I wouldn't want to have to make it one way or the other. And I know that about myself, and that's why I will always have pet insurance. And, I think that tech, is espousing a similar sentiment. You're going to do whatever you can to make sure that you maximize the quality of the time that you have with your pet, and to extend that time for as long as possible. And, I don't think anybody gets a pet hoping to bankrupt themselves or put themselves in a financially advantageous position for the long haul. So, no, I think that's very, very pertinent advice. I think there's a lot of ways you can make the argument for pet insurance, but at the end of the day, it's just such simple calculus that I think I'm hopeful. Hopefully we can come back here in a few years and talk about adoption of pet insurance being, at least 20%. We see other countries in the world where, I think over in Sweden and the UK, we're up 30-40% of pet owners have pet insurance. I would hope that we could come back here in a year or two and at least be over 10% in the US. Maybe that's optimistic, but fingers crossed, right?
I really hope so. I worked in one clinic that had a higher adoption. I was just a relief vet in an emergency clinic, and that clinic took a bunch of clients from only its feeder clinics, and the feeder clinics were owned primarily by one doctor, and he was really, really good at discussing pet insurance with his clients. And so in that clinic, I saw about 12% insured patients compared to about 3 to 4 in my general practice. And my life as a vet was dramatically different on those shifts that I worked in that clinic, dramatically different. And so I can't imagine how different it was for those families. So I just really, like you, I'd like to see the needle move just a little bit, and see what good things we can achieve in the veterinary community with that. Because I think it's going to be really good. We just have to get the word out.
Yeah. And I think being willing to stand up for it more. I know, so many people that I recommend pet insurance to, dismiss it. And I try to be polite so I don't hammer it home. But, I think if we could find more people like that doctor that, is so good, that he had 4 times the adoption rate that, of the national average, that's what we need. And, whether that's going out and finding those veterinarians who are comfortable and good at having those conversations, or my other big idea that I would love to see some clinics adopt is I would just take a vet tech or maybe your practice manager and get them licensed, make them a licensed insurance agent, and just start selling it out of your clinic. I think that could go a long way as well, and hopefully would provide a little bit of boost to the revenue of the practice just from the commissions, if not the better clientele that you would have, because you would be able to again unlock the full potential of the veterinary toolkit to serve those patients.
Yeah, and I think some clinics, I mean, we would have to explore what the regulations allow there, but I think probably some clinics, if they started thinking that way, would see the difference for themselves.
Yeah, I think they would. Well, Jennifer, I really appreciate this. Has been an awesome conversation. It's been great hearing your stories and getting the vet perspective of the impact that pet insurance can have. I think it's really important because we've looked at this from the perspective of pet insurance carriers with ODPET. We've looked at this from the perspective of Pet Insurance Review, but being able to have somebody who can speak to the difference as a veterinarian of what it's like to be able to treat without financial barriers, and being able to provide full access to care, I think provides a really important perspective to people when they're thinking about pet insurance as part of responsible pet ownership. And hopefully we, this is another step in changing that mindset to make pet insurance one of those things that comes with owning a pet, just like taking them for a walk and feeding them and bringing them to the vet. And hopefully it results in them getting brought to the vet a little bit more often, and results in better overall animal health for everyone.
Yes, absolutely.
Great. Well, thank you so much again, Jennifer Sperry, Medical Director of Independence Pet Group, and a licensed veterinarian. Again, I'm sorry, you were not a licensed insurance agent, but definitely a licensed veterinarian. So, Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Peter Kenseth, Vice President and Partner at Maya Strategy Group, and this has been another episode of Pet Working. Hope you enjoyed, and we will look forward to seeing you on another episode again soon. Take care, everyone.
It's been a pleasure. Take care.
Thanks, Jennifer.